Okay, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Artur Świerczek, and I warmly welcome all participants of this GMRG meeting. I know that there are some of you who haven't been yet involved in the GMRG, therefore I just wanted to shortly indicate that these meetings held every year in different regions of the world are sort of DNA of the group. Networking, building relationships, and joint collaboration are among the most important aspects of the GMRG. To date, 29 on-site meetings have been held beginning with 1990, when the group was founded by two renowned professors, Professor Clay Weiberg from University of North Carolina and Professor Buchor Ro from Sogang University in Korea. This year is different, as this is our 30th in line and the first online meeting. Just a year ago, we planned to hold this meeting in Hangzhou in China and combine it with the PALMS Asia in Xi'an. Then there was a plan to move it up to Brazil. And finally, due to the pandemic, we ended up with the online meeting. The GMRG meetings aim to improve manufacturing supply chains through the development of theory and dissemination of empirical results. We meet up every year to share the ideas, enhance our expertise, and establish collaboration to conduct surveys. Ultimately, we are able to obtain the research results of global coverage, which are instrumental to draft the joint papers submitted to the top-tier academic journals. In these challenging times, I want to give special thanks to a group of people who are particularly involved in organizing this year's online meeting. They're mostly panelists of today's online GMRG meeting. However, at the backstage, being invisible for us, there are also Sweti Rupani and Professor Robert Widmer, who operationally make the whole meeting proceed. I would also like to thank Arizona State University for providing technical support, and Professor Marcio Tome from Pontifical Catholic University of Rio de Janeiro, who agreed to host the meeting. I also need to mention that Professor Marcio Tome made us this honor and accepted the position of the president-elect of the group. I'm glad to turn it over to you, Marcio. The virtual floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Artur. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for participants. We're spread all over the world, counting about 47 people in the room right now. This is terrific. I'd like to welcome you all for attending this virtual meeting this year due to the pandemic. I hope that everyone is being able to see and hear the presentation. I'll just make a short introduction to GMRG, talking about our vision and activities, and then review briefly with you what we have on planned for the agenda and the panelists. We will have this meeting organized in two meetings, one September 4th today and the other one in 2 weeks' time in September 18th. The meeting is being recorded so that you will be able to review it in different time zones. It's very difficult to get everyone around in a synchronous way at the same time, so that all the presentations will be available for all. So just getting through the next slide, we'll be able to review our past history. Just briefly reminding what Artur just told us. It was funded in 1980 by two university professors, Professor Clay Weiberg from North Carolina University and Buchor Ro, I hope I'm pronouncing correctly his name, from Sogang University in South Korea. And the vision of the GMRG is to share ideas, results, and concepts with research colleagues and manufacturers and manufacturing executives around the globe. And we aim to strengthen the linkage between research and practice. And we aim to improve manufacturing supply chains through the development of theory and the dissemination of results. The key characteristics of the groups, is that we are a multinational community of researchers with a global focus, doing systematic research and development of theory and disseminating results. I would add to this list of characteristics that GMRG is an all-inclusive group for the international community of operations management, research, and practice. The basic activities for the global survey is the survey itself. We're going to the 6th round of GMRG, which is a survey on manufacturing practices conducted approximately every 5 years. The annual GMRG conference has this location rotating across global regions. It was planned for China, then moved it for Brazil, and now it's being hosted everywhere on the cloud due to the pandemics. And it aims to promote ongoing collaboration among practitioners and academic collaborations. The agenda and the panelists for the September 4 and the 18th are a really, really good set of people that I'm really proud to be associated with. I would get the honor of having Professor Clay Weibark just after my short introduction of the agenda, presenting the phases of survey data research in general. Teresa, who is a past president from GMRG, will talk about the actual status of GMRG 6, giving us an overview of where we stand by now. Roger Moffrey will be explaining us where we stand with an overview of data collection by country and what are the strategies for data sharing. And still this afternoon, in the first half of the meeting, Thomas Crew will be talking about multi-respondent data collections. Teresa comes back to talk with us with data collection procedures and protocols in Qualtrics. And I'll be talking a little bit before coffee break on translations protocols. We resume at 10:20 Phoenix time, 6:20 London time, 1:20 a.m. Beijing time, talking about the modules of the survey. Core modules: sustainability, innovation, decision-making and culture, supply chain digitalization, and the methodology for qualitative and multi-level analysis with multiple respondent surveys to reach a closure by the end of those presentations. So thanking you all for that. I would like to thank very much Adeoke Oke to accept to moderate this conference and panel, and I'll switch back to Adeoke for the continuation of our presentation today. And we'll be resuming the topics for September 18th in about 15 days. You have that agenda on the invitation you received, so I'll not get into the details of this September 18th. I'll just call the attention to the fact that on September 18th, we'll getting basically a focus on dissemination of results, outreach programs, and publications. So don't lose our September 18th second part of the meeting, and I would ask Adeoke please to continue from here. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Marcio. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the attendees. My name is Adegoke Oke, Arizona State University. It's my pleasure to welcome and to introduce Professor Clay Weiberg, one of the founders of GMRG, to proceed with the very first presentation on phases of survey research. Professor Weiberg.
Okay. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the GMRG 6 as a prelude to the phases of general survey research. First of all, it's important that everyone recognize that indeed GMRG 6 is a global project. It's an exciting project. It's one that I hope you'll get involved with. All projects are a lot of work, but much of the work for this project has already been done. And for those activities that have not yet been completed, there'll be a lot of GMRG support. Okay. Robert, next slide. Uh-oh. These are the phases. You can see there's 8 of them listed, but it's not as debilitating as the poor guy in the chair thinks. They go in a common sequence. It looks linear here, but it's not. There are feedbacks from later activities to earlier activities, but it involves setting the research questions, designing the survey, collecting, cleaning, and analyzing the data, and very importantly, providing feedback to the customers, the manufacturers that we've gathered the data from. And finally, presenting your findings and publishing the research. Robert? Oh, there's the nurse. That's the GMRG nurse. She's available later for any headaches that you guys might have. And I guess she's cured the poor guy that was holding his head in the previous slide. The topic has to be, in general, a contemporary management issue. But to get publications, it needs to be of academic interest, and that requires a literature search. For GMRG 6, these have both been accomplished, and they've been done very professionally. Robert? Now, this is just a bad joke. Hen and chicks. The design of the GMRG 6 survey is a core set of common questions and selectable modules. What's important here is that they're theory-based, and the GMRG team has designed them to be friendly to the referees. That is, they took into account some of the referee concerns that have recently been raised about survey research. Robert? This, imagine that the forward-backward translation and pilot testing is in green. I'll explain that in a moment. But it's clear that translation is something that needs to be done in the field. And we recommend forward translation, i.e. from Swedish to English, and then a backward translation from the Swedish version into English, and then a YouTube video of the giggling that occurs after that. Pilot testing of the survey has to be done in the field again. And you'll see on the next slide, that's why I ask you to think of green. The green color here was not inserted to keep you awake, although I hope it's working. The survey methodology as substantial. There are internet methods available, and GMRG 6 has an internet survey that's been developed on the Qualtrics platform, although there are others, as you can see here. Important in the data collection, though, is something that the GMRG group really supports, and that is regional teams from different institutions that collaborate in gathering the data. Robert? Oops, get out the trash bin. It's amazing. Our experience has shown that regardless of how tightly and exquisitely the instructions are given, errors creep in and devious stuff happens. Data cleaning is a critical part of the process. That includes making sure the units are appropriate and the sums are correct. It's amazing to me how many responses come back with percentage responses that don't sum to 100. Robert? Finally, data analysis. And don't use that tool that guy's bringing unless you've got a bad problem with your eyes. But clearly, appropriate tools are important, and they need to be focused on the issue in the project. This is not a place to demonstrate your statistical skills. You need a clean, clear argument for the selection of your tool and how it helps you answer the issue or shed light on the issue that's being focused on in the project. Robert? Finally, a little victory dance. Presentations and publications. This is what we've been hitting for throughout all of these phases, but they require the development and selection of the appropriate venue for presentations and the appropriate journal for publications, and those will clearly constrain and inform the nature of how those are put together. And one other important piece of advice from years and years of refereeing: please proofread your publications. Robert? Finally, a postlude. We had a prelude. Come and join us. It's going to be a great voyage. There'll be a lot of fun. You'll come away with new colleagues and international friends, and we welcome you aboard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Weiberg. Interesting as always, for taking us through the phases of research and for reminding us all how to actually conduct good research. I will hand over to Professor Betts now, Teresa Betts, also a past president of GMRG, and she's going to be talking about the actual status of GMRG 6 as it stands, generally an overview of what GMRG 6 is all about. Teresa.
Thank you. All right, good morning, everybody from Murray, Kentucky. So I know some of you are 1:30 in the morning, and I so thank you for joining us. Actually, all of you for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and just give a quick overview of where we're at with the survey, and I'm going to do it by looking at kind of the 5 stages of survey design. So stage 1, if we can go ahead and flip to that slide, I'm just going to kind of move through this relatively quickly. Survey design and preliminary planning. These activities have been completed already. So we've identified the research problems and the questions that we're going to look at. We've designed the survey. We've drafted the sampling plan. We've looked at the questionnaire outline, and we've developed a preliminary analysis plan and reporting outline. And then on stage 2 is kind of where we're at now. So we've talked about the sampling frame and what that's going to look like. We've prepared the pretest questionnaire, and it's available in both Qualtrics to submit via email and a PDF format so that you could collect via a manual process or a hard copy process. We did go out to internal and external reviewers in June of 2019. We took their feedback and we revised the questionnaire based on some of the feedback that we received, and we completed that in July of 2019. After that feedback, then in the winter of 2019 into January, February of 2020, we worked on the Q-sort process of new measures. And then we revised those measures based on the Q-sort results in the spring of 2020. And then after that was completed, we began, and I say we very loosely as in the GMRG team, mostly Marceau and his team worked on identifying translation protocols in the spring and summer of 2020. Now, where we're at is from this point forward, if you see something in purple on the slides, that's my kind of asking you to think about volunteering to help kind of take us from the point that we're at today to the data collection process. So we're in the process of pre-testing. We have just a couple of manufacturing plants that have started that. We could use a point person for the pre-test coordination just to help kind of the communication amongst the people who are going to do the pre-testing. And we also need individuals who would volunteer to conduct a pre-test as well. And that's probably the most critical point right now, is making sure that we get that pre-test data back, because we really can't move forward with executing the entire survey until we have the pre-test completed. Okay, let's go to the next slide, Robert. All right, so in stage 3 then, once the pre-test is completed, we're going to be able to revise the survey based on that feedback. And we're working on a manager feedback, kind of a product that we'll provide to people who complete the survey. And Frank, I'm going to just touch bases here that you're heading kind of the development of that report in terms of outlining what it's going to consist of. But I believe that there's an opportunity to make that reporting mechanism user-friendly and to document how we're going to generate that report. I know in years past, there's been something done in Excel, there's been something done in Access, and so I believe we're looking for someone who'd be willing to kind of take that role to help make that process user-friendly and document that. And then we'll have a sample report that we want to share with the data collectors. So when you are trying to recruit your manufacturing plants, it's something that you can use as part of the show and tell with potential survey participants. And then also in stage 3, we need to finalize the training information and delivery method. And we have kind of individuals that have been actively engaged in certain areas, like developing the outline for the sampling plan, developing, how many survey respondents everybody that participates needs to collect. And then also I've been working on documenting how we would use Qualtrics and to collect our survey data. And so we have pieces of the puzzle that we need to put it all together in a professional format. And then data collection would begin as soon as the pre-testing is complete, right? The volunteers, we need to collect data. So George had a form that he had put out, I'm gonna say a while back, and I've included a link to that at the end of this. And maybe I'll let George, when it's your presentation, you may speak to whether or not you want them to use that form or just email you, but I've got a link to that form in this presentation. And then data collector updates on completed and in progress surveys. We need to have a process in place so that as you start data collection, if you email to a manufacturing plant, you'll need to have some method of seeing, have they completed what portions of the survey or all of the survey and just some type of update. So we need someone with a Qualtrics license that could be the point person on developing and sending that update. And again, as Clay mentioned earlier, those that have been involved, I've been involved in helping develop the Qualtrics part of it, and we would help whoever would be that volunteer, but we're just really looking for some volunteers to step up and take on portions of what we have for completing this process. Okay, and then next slide, George. And then stage 5, right, is the data quality checks, the preparation of the data file and distribution of the data file. And there, I think we have kind of George is gonna be responsible for that type of distribution of the data file. And but I'm not sure at this point. We may have other opportunities there for people to help and participate, but we haven't specifically defined those yet. Okay. So in conclusion, we hope you'll volunteer at least to collect data. And so there's the link to the GMRG 6 country co-investigators. And then if you're interested in volunteering in one of the areas that's identified in purple, right, there's a link for the GMRG 6 volunteer link, and it just basically is a checkbox where you can enter your information and what you would be interested in volunteering in. So that's a quick overview of where we're at. And again, I anticipate when we come back on the 18th, we'll have some more information about progress on the pre-testing.
Thank you, Teresa. Thanks for that very good overview of the status of GMRG 6 and for the call to arms. As we can see, it takes more than a village to raise a child, so volunteers are needed. We're going to move on to George. Again, people are responsible for this data collection. These are the people on the ground. These are the people who actually do the work. So George is going to give us an overview of those data collectors by country and by data. George.
Hi, everyone. My name is George Onofre, and I look after the GMRG data collection process. So if anybody has any questions, anything in relation to the how can they become a volunteer for data collection and so on, please get in touch with me. I'll be more than happy to help you. To date, if we can go to the next. So to date, we have 37 registered country co-investigators, which are, they've signed up to collect data among 20 countries. 5 out of those country co-investigators, they haven't yet confirmed the country, but I've sent an email, and if any of you have received an email from me over the last week in relation to what country are you planning to collect, please reply and let me know what country you are likely to collect, because that will allow me then to have for each country who are the representatives that are going to collect for that. Next, please. So as you can see here, this is a very quick overview by country. And you can see in each country how many representatives are there, right? As you can see, we have in Australia 1, in Brazil 1, in China 1, Colombia 2, Croatia 1, Ecuador has 6, Germany 1, India 1, Indonesia 1, Ireland, we have 2 in Ireland, Nigeria 1, Pakistan 1, Poland we have 2, and Portugal, Romania 2, Russia, South Korea and Turkey 1. In US we have 3 representatives, and then in Vietnam we have 1. Okay, so what we are trying to do is we're trying to get everyone to kind of connect. And once we have finalized the list of all data collectors, what we want to do is we want them to put the data collectors in touch with each other so they can collaborate in terms of data collection. Because one of the things is if you're collecting in the same country, you want to make sure that you don't collect the same, you could go onto the same manufacturing company. So that's one of the things that we want to avoid. Now, just to mention that the email that I sent earlier on this week, it was sent only to people that have not mentioned the country that for which they were collecting data. So if you haven't received an email as a data collector from me, that means that you have specified your country for which you are collecting. Now, very important for us in terms of the data collection process is to kind of make sure that, as you heard earlier on, that you get involved as much as possible with our process and also with our seminars and the training seminars, because you can see from a CCI role, mainly we need to look at survey translations. And one of the things it is that from my discussions with various coordinators, they were saying that they are going to use the English version of the questionnaire. However, there are certain countries that might require maybe a different language to be translated in. So therefore, that is very important, you know, to pay attention to. And Marcio is going to talk about this protocol of survey translations. Obviously, we're looking to in the questionnaire, and you'll see if you haven't seen yet a draft, we're trying to collect multiple points of data as well. And we want as well the CCI to be involved in the data interpretation. So obviously to make sure that the data is accurate, that we don't have missing values and so on. So that's one of the points that Teresa raised about having somebody who would work with Qualtrics to check the progress. Because once you send a link, right, to a company, you have no idea whether the company has filled it in or not. So that's very, very important. However, if you prefer to use the hard copy, that as well is an alternative where you can use, you know, a printed version, and then you go online yourself and you fill in the actual response as per the data that you receive from the company. So we tried as much as possible to accommodate different roles with the CCIs of data collection. Now, a very important element for us is the actual data collection process in terms of what are the requirements for each data collector within each country. So we set a threshold of 30 responses per country. So if you are a data collector from one particular country, the minimum required is 30 in order to get access to the full GMRG data. Okay. Now, if in a country we have multiple data collectors, then what we want is each individual to have collected a minimum of 10, and then cumulatively they would have a minimum of 30. Okay, so if you are 2 members in a country, then 15 and 15, if you, let's say, if you agree on that number, then you have a minimum of 30 that you reach in order for you to get access to the full GMRG data. It's very important for us to have that, because, I mean, if you collected data in GMRG4 and GMRG5, for example, you know the effort that you put in, and it's quite intense and it's quite difficult. You know, it's a challenging process. But that's one of the things that I would like to encourage any of you. If you have seen, for example, your country having only one data collector, right? Please get in touch with me. And if you want to collect data as well, I will send you a link that you can click in, and then you can register your details. And Teresa as well, I think she put the link, and that link is the one that collects all the data from you with regards to the country co-investigators. Also, if you haven't seen your country in the previous slide, so in the previous slide, well, I had all the countries. If your country is not there and you're willing to collect data, please get in touch with me and register as a data collector, and that will then allow us to put you into the list. Now, another thing that I wanted to mention in the previous slide, Robert, one of the things is the data sharing and publishing. What we wanted, because again, the effort that people put in and so on, we wanted to make sure that the data is protected and the data is being used only by people who are actually involved in the data collection process. You know, they're involved in the gathering of the responses. So data sharing and publishing is prohibited unless at least one of the CCI is a co-author on the particular publication. So this is what we wanted to make clear from the very, very beginning to all data collectors, that we will protect the data to make sure that nobody gets their hands on the data and they use it then for publications. So it will be only data collectors that have access to the data, and then any sort of publication that will be using GMRG data, it must have at least one of the CCIs as a co-author. So that's why it's very important for you to register as a CCI with us. Okay, because if you are a registered CCI, then you can use the data later on. Next. So, as I mentioned, if you or your colleagues are able to collect data in your or maybe other countries, and you would like to know more about becoming a GMRG CCI, please contact me at george.onofre@ucd.ie. And I will provide you with a short kind of one-page overview of the data collection, and also with a link where you can click and register your details. Any questions you have, just please let me know, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George, for that detailed overview of the data collection protocol. At this point, let me just remind all the attendees, if you have questions, please use the Q&A function, and we'll try and answer the questions. Anyone that we cannot answer, we'll push the questions to the next meeting. And I must also say that the presenters have been doing a great job of keeping to time. So that's good to see. Let's keep this up. It's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker, Professor Call, a friend and a colleague. He's going to talk about multi-respondent data collection. As we all know, the bar for survey research is getting higher and higher. So this is one of the ways by which we can start to think about scaling that bar. Tom.
Thank you, Goki, and thank you for reminding me that I have to stay on schedule. All right, so hello everyone. Thomas Call, Arizona State University, and it's been my pleasure to be working on the GMRG 6 for quite some time now. And I mean, just want to hats off to everybody. It's just so nice to see this coming to fruition from a meeting from so long ago in Melbourne when we just started thinking about this. So what I'm going to talk about, I have a few presentations, so you're going to get thoroughly bored of me by the end of this. I will be talking right now about a little bit of complications with this particular survey construction. And you'll see this in a moment. And what I want to do is first point out that in our quest to try to be flexible and adaptable for everybody's needs throughout the world, but also to be responsible for really the scientific need to have reliability in our responses, we've created multiple ways in which this survey will be deployed, and while also being able to collect multiple respondents, multiple informants, making sure we get the key informants and the multiple respondents as needed. So we have an email-based Qualtrics, so I'll be showing to you the way to visualize that. That's continually being updated. You'll see multiple versions of this later. Talk about some paper-based issues that everyone who's going to be a data collector should keep in mind. And then really some open-ended issues that we still have not yet nailed down once we start to really take into account this critical issue of non-independence of samples. And it's not the easiest task, and I'll illustrate that in a second. So Robert, next slide. The way to visualize the flow. The data collector is going to be gaining a point of contact with a facility. Remember that the unit of analysis here is the facility. It's not a company. It is a single facility, and sometimes that's not altogether clear. But there will be a point of contact that could be the primary informant. It may not be. But the primary contact will work with a primary informant who will also work with multiple other informants and create a set of multiple respondents. So if you start at the top, there is a data collector contacting a plant. That PI or primary informant that you get to will be identifying the multiple informants for all the various modules, as well as the areas where multiple respondents are needed. In particular, the culture and leadership module. I'm sitting there in the green box, the big green box there. And then, I mean, this is really both for email and this whole conversation needs to happen in the paper-based as well. There's a bit of upfront work on identifying all the various, essentially a team of people at the facility that are needed. You'll notice later if you receive the survey, it's quite long, and we fully recognize that. That's why we've dropped the number of facilities down to 10, as well as we tried to break up the data collection. So I'm dropping down to the next level where we expect the various modules to be responded to, and these will be the informants, the various people that are knowledgeable in those areas. And so we'll have in the email, essentially this survey, what happens is the information gets transmitted electronically to the various people, and Teresa can explain this in more detail, but gets transmitted electronically to the various individuals who are the key informants or key respondents. And so as it cascades down from the green to the dark blue through the various modules and down into within the modules where multiple respondents are needed. And through this cascading effect, we are trying to capture the data in a rigorous way, in a reliable way. So next slide, please. Regarding this, so if it's paper-based, we got to keep in mind that this is continually evolving. We're trying to make it user-friendly, but there will be this issue of multiple copies. It's not a situation where one copy can be sent unnecessarily. There's a coordination that's needed wherein the copies of the various elements of the paper-based survey need to be made. And I think you'll need, if you're a data collector, plan to use the paper-based, please coordinate with Teresa and George on this, as that's a challenging, at least a little bit of a challenging coordination. Once we've set it up so that if you're using the paper-based, that once you receive those back, or if some data collectors are there on site, either way, once you have all of the paper-based responses, there is an input, user-friendly input function in Qualtrics that has built-in quality control checks that are meant to prevent problems. So those are some nuances of the data collection on the paper-based. Other nuances to consider, for instance, if you're working with a smaller facility, and we mentioned that there are key informants with maybe the supply chain module and the key informants with the innovation module, these all may be the same person. If it's a small enough facility and you can validate that the individual is knowledgeable, we'll need validation of that. If that's possible, then all may be the key informants for the modules. There may be overlap, which is quite fine for smaller facilities. As facilities get larger, that's less and less likely to be able to validate. Also, with a unit of analysis of a facility, we're trying to make sure there is independence between facilities. In other words, if we have some companies with multiple facilities, and we need to still open for discussion how exactly we control that. For that, one of the ideas is that if they're distinct enough, if the facilities are distinct enough in either with industry, in different industries, then it's possible. For a large enough company, just ownership, it has to be just on some paper somewhere that they're owned by the same company. That may qualify. So that's open for discussion, and I think that needs to be something that's coordinated with us as we go. Next slide there, please. Go back one since I'm done there, please, Robert. A lot of this will be coordinated with, I want to bring up with George Onofre, who's going to be coordinating with you as a data collector. Please utilize him as a mode of communication. He may not have all the answers, but he will be your way in which he will be compiling and coordinating that, and he'll be working with the rest of us on the design side to help answer those questions as we go. And we'll memorialize those answers, and so everyone, basically create a FAQ for everyone to share. All right, so yeah, please send questions to us as we go, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. You finished with 1 second to spare. Great job.
Give me a goal and I'll hit it.
Right, so let me bring back Teresa. She's going to talk about the protocol in Qualtrics. Teresa, over to you.
Great. All right. Thanks so much. So we have some, we've used Qualtrics this time out to input all of the survey information. And so what I'll be doing in this kind of high level overview is just talking about the different ways that when we collect data, how that data will be kind of collected. So I'm going to review the fundamentals of how we use an email-based survey, and I'm also going to talk a little bit about what other options there are after the pretest is completed. All right. So generically speaking, we currently have two kind of approaches to collecting data. One is that you can do a hard copy survey collection where the data collector hands out hard copies of the survey at the manufacturing plant and then collects them and then enters them into Qualtrics. So regardless of, and you don't have to have a Qualtrics license to enter that, you just have to have the links to the survey to be able to do that, right? What we tried to do then is also offer another method that would allow you as a data collector to forward a survey link to Qualtrics to a primary contact at a manufacturing plant. And in doing so, what you would do is you would start into the same exact survey link the data collector would have in the hard copy, but it has a branch option which says, okay, I'm going to not enter the data, but I'm going to forward the survey to a primary contact at a manufacturing plant. Okay. And typically you would have had a previous conversation with that individual so they would know that this is coming, right? And so you're going to send that to them. They're going to get okay, here's our introductory email. Here's the link for the primary contact at a manufacturing plant. And then they're going to be able to input who they identify as key informants for each module, okay? They might self-select and say, I'm the right person to complete this. And so once they do that, once they identify all the key informants, for those areas that they've self-selected, right, it brings up the questions for them to complete. Once they complete the survey, and there's kind of a key point that is a little bit of a sticking point in Qualtrics, they have to complete the survey before their survey links will be forwarded out to the key informants that they've identified. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. Let's take a look at some terminology just to make sure that we're kind of all on the same page with when we say data collector, that's the member of GMRG who's collecting the data for the 6th round of the survey. The primary informant is the individual at the plant that the data collector works with to identify key informants to complete the different survey modules, right? Then we have what we would call a level 1 key informant, right? That's the individual identified by the primary informant that's got the expertise to complete those topical modules. And then a level 2 key informant is someone identified by a level 1 to say, and now here's some people that could complete another set of questions about this particular module. So let's go ahead and look at the overview of how this survey instrument flow would work. Okay, so again, at the very top, right, the data collector, the country data collector initializes the survey for a plant through this Qualtrics link. So you would go in and you would input a plant ID, a country code, your information. And then why this is handy is because that information is captured in that initial input by you, and it is automatically forwarded and included in the link that we're sending to the primary contact at the plant, okay? And so then we don't have to ask the primary contact at the plant to input that information when they complete the survey because it's just forwarded through the link, okay? And so then the primary contact receives their Qualtrics survey and they're asked to complete who are the key informants for the modules. And we have also set it up so that that primary contact could actually identify someone to complete the core module as well. Initially, we set it up thinking they would be the one to complete it, but in fact, they may have someone else that they think is a better key informant to complete that core module. So you can see that what could happen is the primary contact receives a survey. They say, okay, Mr. A is going to complete the core module, Mr. B is going to complete the sustainability module, and Mrs. C is going to complete the supply chain module, etc. for each module. Once they input their email information and they complete the survey, it will forward out a link to just that particular module to that person with an introductory email that says the primary contact's name and says, has identified you as a key informant for completing this module. Here's the survey link in Qualtrics. Okay, and so across the board then, these are going to be going out to at least one key informant. Okay, when we get to the culture and leadership modules, excuse me, the primary contact is asked to identify 3 to 5 people to complete the culture and leadership module. Okay, and then for those measures that need a second informant, right? Then the level 1 key informant is asked to identify who's a level 2 key informant that could also complete these perceptual questions. And so in that way, we are collecting data from multiple respondents, and from each of those, the contact information from the data collector and the plant ID is forwarded through each of the links all the way down to that level 2 key informant, so that we're not asking them to input information that's common across the surveys. Okay, let's go ahead and go to the next slide, and I'll just kind of touch bases on a couple of works in progress and some things that we want to do with the pre-testing. Okay, I'm sorry, Robert, could you go back to the slide? I've got just 2 more points I want to make about this. There are 2 challenges with using Qualtrics in this fashion, and we'll emphasize it in the training, but I want to start by presenting it now so that everybody's aware of those challenges. If the survey links won't be forwarded on unless the previous individual has actually completed the Qualtrics survey. So just because the primary contact identifies the key informants, if they don't complete the survey, it won't automatically forward them on until they finish that survey. So that's going to be something that, you know, we communicate in the email that goes from one contact to the next. But if we're having if we see that we're having a gap where it's gotten to a certain point and not completed, it may be that that person hasn't ended the survey in order for it to trigger Qualtrics to go ahead and forward those emails out. The second aspect of it is that the information that we're going to forward on can't have any blanks in it. So when I ask for the country data collector name, it needs to be, I have a slot for first name and a slot for last name, right? And on the instructions, it says if there's a blank, make sure that you put an underline in place of the blank, because if we don't do that, that data won't be forwarded and it will actually break the link in terms of forwarding that on. So again, that's going to be key things that we want to include in the training, but I just want to, again, to bring up those challenges early on so that we can make sure that we're addressing those. All right. And then the last slide that I have on this, right, what we're going to do is we're going to be talking about some options that we'll have in the future once the pre-test is complete. All right. I know that in the EU, George and Yasna have done a great job of communicating that there's challenges with collecting information about emails and private information. So once we're done modifying the current set of surveys, I'll create a set that's anonymous. So the management of that will be different than the email version, right? There'll be links to it, but as a data collector, you would have to forward the links to the primary contact, and they will have to input the plant ID and all of that information that would normally be transferred across those email links, okay? It's currently set up that you input all of the information at once, right? So if I'm a data collector and I go to a plant, I wouldn't necessarily, if I got 3 of the modules done, but not all of them, I would need to wait until I had all of the information to complete that. And I'll set up a set that you can input in portions as opposed to inputting it all at once. But I want to wait until we have the information back from the pre-test to do that. All right. That concludes my portion of the presentation. So I'll look forward to any questions, and we'll try to make sure we get good answers back to you in a short amount of time.
Yeah, thanks, Teresa. Just a reminder again, if you have questions, please use the Q&A function of Zoom rather than the chat function. The chat function is for general issues. So we're going to move on to, so we have one outstanding question under the Q&A. I believe Tom is already answering that. We're going to move on to the last presentation before the virtual coffee break. And this is going to be by Marcio. Wouldn't it be good if we all spoke the same language? You know, I mean, like native language, say Swahili. Well, that was meant to be funny. Well, anyway, with this kind of thing, we have to do back and forth translations. And this is what Marcio is going to talk about. Marcio.
All right, I'm unmuted now. That's okay. It's great if you can speak just one language, and it's great also that we're not unmuted, right? So that we can be heard. Let's talk a little bit about the translation protocol for GMRG. It's a very well-known issue on cross-cultural research that we do need not only to translate words, but also sometimes to translate concepts altogether. So the purpose here of the short presentation is to recommend the translation protocol for the GMRG 6 round. Looking into the translation for the source language, which in our case here is the English questionnaire, to target languages. So please, Robert, thank you for the next one. If I'm going from an ascending order of rigor into the translation process, I can do just a forward-only translation. Take it from English to, let's say, Spanish or French or Greek. I can also, in a second step, forward do a testing of the forward translation in the field. The third more rigorous aspect would be to back translate it to the original language. The first one will be to back translate and also do a monolingual test. We know that monolingual population have different perception and understanding of concepts than bilingual population. When you learn a foreign language, you also learn some concepts and some behaviors from the foreign language. So on the fourth step, we say that we should at least do a field test after the translation with the monolingual population to which we will be applying the survey. The fifth level will be a back translation with a bilingual test, and the most rigorous approach will be to do a back translation with a bilingual and a monolingual test, which we do acknowledge as being very cumbersome and time consuming. So by therefore, we'll get through the different more rigorous protocols and came out at the end of this presentation with a recommended simple protocol that includes back translations from the target language to the language of the application of the questionnaire, and then the back translation to the target. So in the next slide, we can see that translation is really an essential aspect of data equivalence in cross-cultural research. The back translation really allows the modification of words and concepts that has no precise equivalence in other language. I can give some short examples. In Portuguese, words like polis and politics, exploration and exploitation, have no semantic equivalence. This requires additional instructions in the questionnaire if you want to convey the proper meaning of those terms. And this is well documented, for instance, on the work by Zhao and colleagues. The cultural differences might also be detected during back translation, and several examples are in there with cultural differences affecting translations, with examples provided for the Chinese culture by Zhao and colleagues in previous publications. So that brings us to the next slide, please, where we look at at least two types of equivalence. One is to get ways of judging the comparability of language if you have semantic equivalences, and also if you have conceptual equivalences, what will be the similarity of interpretability. Are we understanding concepts the same way? That goes a little bit beyond of understanding the wording and the semantic equivalence. So there is a scale proposed in previous work by Sperber that help us to measure out if we have comparability of language and comparability of concepts between the related work and the target and the original language questionnaires. Next, please. Thank you, Robert. If I looked into this process of back translation, we started at the square at the left from the source language to the target language. And then we have the back translation. It is important that the back translation is done by someone that don't know the original source language questionnaire. So in case of the Portuguese language for the Brazilian Portuguese questionnaire, the ones that translated from English to Portuguese were not the same ones that translated back from Portuguese to English. And we made also sure that the ones that translated from Portuguese back to English didn't know and it had access to the original questionnaire. When you get the back translated version, you check for comparability and similarity. And if you reach comparable and similar terms and concepts between the two questionnaires, then you go for the field test with the monolingual population. If not, you get back to work on your target language questionnaire until you have something that don't show a lot of discrepancies from comparability and similarity. Then you go for a local pretest with monolingual population and check for questions or answers discrepancies. And when you finally don't have question or answer discrepancies on your field test with the monolingual population in the country of application, then you say you're ended with your translation and pretest of translation protocol. Next, please, Robert, then let us suggest a minimum standard with the steps for quality translation and GMRG survey. First, I think we should hold to the techniques of back translation. It seems to us, based on what we could test and see in those first phases of GMRG 6, that just translating from the original language to the target language would not suffice. It's not sufficient to just do forward translation. We should also see for and report equivalence for comparability and sensitivity, both for wording and comparability and sensitivity for the meaning of the content. As much as possible, single translators should be avoided. And we could think in terms of working forward and back translation in small committees of 2 to 5 experts each in each country. And to undertake, which is the fourth step, a 2-phase pretest of the final instrument. First, with a small committee of academics, industry experts, or practitioners that can get a first reading of the translated questionnaire, and second one with the monolingual population target language. And finally, for the second phase of pretest, follow accepted guidelines for sample size based on the expected probability of occurrence of problems in the translated questionnaire. In other words, to get a sufficient number of questionnaires tested with the monolingual population to which the questionnaire will be applied in large scale later. It is very important that we pay attention to the quality of this translation and back translation process. Language and conceptual errors during the translation process are very challenging to spot after survey fieldwork or during the data analysis phases. In this context, we feel strongly that back translation should be mandatory for those that would be undertaking the translation of the GMRG 6 questionnaire to the target, from the original to the target language. And I think this will improve very much the quality of our cross-cultural research. So just for the next, I think this is the last slide I have. So Robert, thank you for going to the next one. And again, the next one, please. Thank you very much. And if you have questions, please just post those on our question and answer session. And we will be looking forward to answer to your. Thank you, Adigo.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marcio. That was great. So just to summarize, so far, we started by looking at an overview of the research process, and then we went into the detail, first of all, with the overview of GMRG 6 itself, and then the detail of data collection protocol and the tools for collecting data for the GMRG 6. In the next session, in the after the coffee break, we're going to go into the context of the questionnaire itself. But before we do that, I'd like to remind you all that there is a poll that is live at the moment. Please complete the poll. And also, if you have any questions, any outstanding questions, please post under the Q&A function. There's a lot of detail being shared, so we can understand if you have a lot of questions. Okay, this is the time for coffee break. We should be back here in about 15 minutes, Brazilian time, 14:20, Phoenix time, 10:20, London time, 18:20, and Beijing, very, very early in the morning if you're still awake, at 1:20. See you guys soon.
Oh boy.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. There are a couple of questions in the Q&A function. One is for George, and I think the second question, anyone can take that. Teresa, Tom, or Professor Weiberg, please feel free to directly answer the second question. So we move on to the the second part of the conference. We're going to start with the discussion about the core model of the GMRG 6. Tom?
All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. And this just a reminder, these are, we have multiple modules. This is the way it's the GMRG 6, similar to other GMRG surveys in the past. And we deem these modules, each module be a required module. You know, decision to make it in the past, we have had these optional. Now we'd like them all to be completed. And that is it's a bigger task for everyone, and we recognize that. And so as always, we are here to help. The core module is meant to capture a lot of the contextual variables that are useful for control purposes, but also to capture the performance variables that you can use for some of your theoretical testing. The basic structure of the module is very similar to GMRG 5, although we did reduce various elements from it. The conceptual model, as you can see from left to right, we capture how the priorities of the plant, how it's evaluated, and that is deemed to influence the strategies that are used throughout the human resource, manufacturing program strategies. All of those investments, whatnot, configurations are deemed to be following from what its are, which then in turn influence performance and overall probability. We capture that in various ways. Not all plants are measured the same way in what can be deemed financial success or financially viable. You'll notice at the bottom, we do capture contextual variables that are meant to, such as competition, environmental influences, industry, country, obviously plant attributes, and we also have culture and leadership that are expected to influence that as well. Next slide, please. Within the module, we have different blocks. The introduction block, just essentially capturing the basic contact information for follow-up purposes. The contact information is not for distribution, but that is held for internal control purposes. What is for distribution will be the following three: demographics, to capture industry size information, the number of employees, the volume, also the technical characteristics of the plant inventory, turns, inventory, labor, the different breakdowns of labor, products, most of the attributes of the key products of the plant, all like that, essentially considered demographic questions. So we see 31 of those. Next block, the competitive priorities, context, and performance. This is where we capture the dimensions of how the plant is evaluated, the priorities of the plant, as well as the performance related. These are obviously separated to at least alleviate as best as possible common method bias, and we include objective as well as subjective measures there. We capture the competitive environment. This is somewhat akin to the 5 forces model that we look to get captured. And last are the internal practices. We have 11 questions there, and I'll show you a nuance in the next slide. But this is meant to capture the where those decisions are being made in order to achieve the priorities of the plan. Next slide, please, Robert. Thank you. One interesting thing that's different from the past with respect to performance and investments. Performance we felt it was important not only to capture, in the past we captured the plant relative to itself. In other words, we look at its unit, its cost performance, quality performance, and whatnot relative to itself, which is shown there as 2 years ago, but also relative to other benchmark plants. We wanted to include that as well in this iteration. So we have essentially 2 ways of looking at performance, and I know plants look at that. That's more realistic for plants that are out there. And then we also did the same thing for 2 reference points for investments, both from the past and investments in the past, and also to gauge its current level engagement with a particular programmatic area. So if you see in the bottom left, for instance, we're looking at quality management, various quality management programs, Six Sigma. We're looking at how much they've invested currently, and then the current level engagement. The idea is here that we felt that some of the plants have already invested in this from a few years back, so the level of investment in the last 2 years would be low, but we don't want that to imply that they're not currently engaged in that practice. So we wanted to really capture both of those as a way in which to measure effort in a certain area. Next slide, please. So real quick overview of the core module. Once again, it's the intention here is that we're trying to provide the performance as well as a lot of the control variables that are of use. They may be useful and has been used for instrumental variables for those who are looking to, and we know this is a cross-sectional survey. And so issues of endogeneity obviously will be brought up. So we do see that the core module is useful for investigating and looking for instrumental variables, which we put in there multiple measures to capture different things. And so you can utilize it for that purpose as well. Last thing I want to mention here is that the core module and all the other modules, we intend, we're still trying to design this yet, we intend to have a auditing process. So very similar to any manufacturing plant that's not able to do 100% inspection. We deem that the information being gathered needs to have some degree of random inspection. And so we'd like to institute an auditing process since we are using key informants. We'd like to do a random follow-up function. And we've discussed this, but like I said, we still need to nail down exactly how to do this. But we'd like to be communicative to the key informants that we would like effort being put into accurate answers. We know they're informants, but we'd like them to put in the effort there. And so keep that in mind as if you're a data collector answering this question of validity and reliability. We're trying to embed that as much as we can in the process.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tom. That was great. So the next set of presentations, we'll now start to look at each of the other models, starting with sustainability. There's a live question from Nicola. So please, panelists, if any one of you would like to address that question. Yeah, Marcia, sustainability.
Right. Thank you, Ergo. Let's talk about the sustainability module and how it was conceived at GMRG 6. The sustainability module actually deals with the process improvement, the decision making that goes into process improvement at the plant level. So the overarching research question for the sustainability module is how does sustainability affect the decision making process within the plant? So the focus here is clearly at the plant level, as the plant is the place where fundamental decisions for sustainability are made and put into action. So to face this complex problem, we split the overarching questions into a set of more specific questions that we see in the next slide, please, Robert, which is basically It's based on some original research work provided by Teresa Betts, David Lucine, and people working on, including myself, on the sustainability model, but essentially came from some original research looking into the specific research questions. The first one is, how do sustainability competitive priorities affect the operations managers' decision-making processes? So we have the sustainability priorities from one end, and then the decision-making process characteristics of inclusivity, breadth, and depth, and how it is affected by the sustainability priority. And in order, how does characteristics from the decision-making process would in turn affect the decision-making process performance in terms of its speed and effectiveness. Which brings us to a third research question, is the effect of sustainability decision-making on plant sustainability performance. Those are the three main sub questions from the structural model of the sustainability part of the questionnaire. In the next slide, please, we'll see that we'll also look to see how the type of decision would in turn moderate the relationships, how it affects the sustainability-related decision characteristics and performance, how the types of decision would affect the relationship between sustainability and decision-making characteristics, how it would moderate the relationship between decision-making process characteristics and process performance, and finally, how it will moderate the relationship between decision-making process performance and sustainability performance. And finally, we looked at how do institutional factors affect the sustainability-related decisions, characteristics, and performance. Just looking with secondary data into institutional factors and its relations with the competitive frames. So in the next slides, we just have a first glance on the questions for the decision-making module. This is on the process improvement decision-making, and the sustainability questions are in there. It's a very simple and I think straightforward part of the questionnaire. We ask the respondents to indicate the percentage of influence that they would recognize on the factors for the decision making. We ask them to first identify a process improvement project, and for that specific project, what was the weight of economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, social sustainability, or other considerations into the decision-making process. And we ask an open question for them to describe which project they are answering about it. And then SU3, the third question, just give us a perception on objective questions about which percentage of the total annual spending on improvement projects is this project that is being reported accounted for. So SU4 looked into the stakeholders' influence in the process. Next, please, using the Likert scales from 1 to 7. And then we looked into the characteristics of the decision-making process itself, looking into the breadth, the depth, the inclusivity of the process with SU 5, 6, and 7, and then finalize the module indicating, and this is common for the different modules of the survey, which department participated mostly in answering the module. And we finalize with open questions, and Cole will be talking about the open questions and qualitative data being collected with the questionnaire later on, but would give us some more information about the ways that economic, environmental, and social factors are considered when process improvement decisions are made. How do the various stakeholders influence the decision at your plant? And in the next slide, that should be our last one, I guess, we ask also for open questions describing how the plant managers measure and value the relative importance of the different dimensions of sustainability outcomes, economic, environmental, and social. And finally, we ask to describe the major successful instance of a process improvement and how it impacted the economic, environmental, and social outcomes. Those open questions, they allow us to do some triangulation of data and comparison with perceptual data obtained through Likert scales with open-ended questions that would enrich the analysis and allow us to do some probing on the answers provided to the module. I believe this should be my last slide on this presentation. Please convey any questions to the Q&A session, and we'll be answering them today still, or by email, or on September 18th meeting. I thank you, and thank you, Adegoke.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marcio. The next two presentations will be delivered by Tom Call. So please, with the first one, innovation, and the second one on decision making and culture, please, Tom, just roll over to the second one as soon as you finish the first one. Okay, over to you, Tom.
All right. So the next module, Innovate, is the innovation module, and this was deemed to, we wanted to capture a interesting question that's been floating around. It's been kind of popular. We wanted to see if it really does exist in a manufacturing plant, and this is the notion of an ecosystem, or a network of actors, or a network of people who make manufacturing process innovations happen. This is not related to product innovations. This is related to process innovations. And we felt that that was more germane to the plant, something more relevant to the manufacturing managers and the people inside. But and we felt that this was it was a great idea. It was one of these ideas that you say, okay, it sounds very interesting, and let's do it. And then we realized, well, this is not really very easy to do. And in fact, both conceptually, this work is still evolving. But we did this intentionally. We knew that we wanted to capture something a little bit more difficult and a little bit more cutting edge that could capture the attention of the review panels that we will be submitting to. And by the way, we forgot to mention, and we should say this sometime in the before we leave. We will be having the chief editor, one of the chief co-editors of the Journal of Operations Management, coming on the next meeting and on the 18th. And we reached out to these editors, and also the editor for the empirical sciences side of it, JOM. The point is that we wanted their attention and we wanted their input into this process. And they feel strongly that we need to continue doing primary research, but we need to be doing interesting primary research. And so this is part of that push, and they're looking to support us in that push. So back to the innovation module. So on the right is the model itself, and we see that the plant priorities from the core module then will be influencing the MPI priorities, or those areas that are considered important as to why are they implementing process innovations. And those priorities, kind of internal to the innovation system, should drive both the investments, MPI investments, as well as the radicalness of the MPI project. We capture that in the module itself. And from that radicalness, this is where we think is the main driver for reaching into that innovation, we'll call it innovation network, both the internal people inside the plant and the external actors outside the plant that may be employed and tapped into for ideas and for generating interesting concepts and ways in which to solve problems. That innovation network, and I'll show you in a moment how we capture that, then drives along with the MPI investments, the end performance of innovation, the innovation performance measures that we include both in the core and in the innovation module. Again, trying to alleviate a priori the common method bias that we expect may be present. So we do that internally to the survey design itself. Lastly, in the innovation module, you see at the bottom, you see the innovation network facilitating mechanisms and perceived importance. We felt that these are likely moderators as to what areas of the innovation network are used and how frequently or how well they are used. And we deem those to be moderating effects in there. Now, as with all of our models, again, I'll emphasize that you can't really test this entire model in a single paper. And our models are always there to help inform our research investigation. We do these for the sake of the GMRG members to be able to find interesting questions within these large conceptual models, large frameworks. And so this is for you, for the members, for your benefit. And all of these, if we haven't said it already, I'll say it again, all of these modules have a purpose and design document with extensive literature that is for you to build on. So we have done the preliminary work on motivating as well as grounding in the literature these ideas. They're for you to build on or to correct us where we were wrong in developing these. So, but they're there for your benefit, and definitely reach out and tap us for those. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so how in the world do you capture a network in this? So we do this through multiple respondents in the module itself. We ask for various functions in the plant to be responding to questions of who do you use for knowledge, who do you use for information related to your function, and in particular related to the topic. And so you'll see down below where say in the last 2 years, we indicate how often you have given or gone to people in the internal function for information and knowledge and work-related topics. So this is what is trying to capture how frequently these other functions are used or integrated. And this is not, we didn't come up with this. This is something that others have used to capture knowledge networks and innovation networks. And so we're using those techniques here. So you notice on the whoever this function is, they'll be responding for internal actors in the network as well as externally in the bottom right, customers, suppliers, research organizations, etc., consultants and whatnot. And so we some of our theory is that the more radical the innovations are, the more frequently they'll be, the larger that network will be. They'll be expanding externally, and more to the external help may be needed. So more for more exploration purposes, internally maybe more for exploitation purposes. And that's roughly the idea that we're running with. So once again, the next slide, please. What we'll do is we'll take this. You can form an adjacency matrix as long as you, on the upper left-hand side, so long as you're capturing these various functions, as many can be captured, we can then itemize how frequently they interact with these various network actors. And on the right, through, and this is just a real simple graph online website that I use to just create these simple graphs. Again, totally hypothetical. It's my manufacturing plant that I have in my backyard here. This is what I use. No, but this is so this essentially would be, you can use network type indicators or network type measures, like eigenvalues and network dimensionality measures and whatnot, for maybe making predictions as to what this network may or may not do inside the plant for enabling process innovations. And so this is our kind of a swing for the fences kind of approach to try to capture what does really no one has ever tried to capture before, which is this innovation network or the ecosystem of process innovations in a manufacturing plant. So with that is essentially, so if you want to call us crazy or want us to applaud us for our boldness or however you want to gives us some ideas, please send some questions over through the Q&A. We'll try to keep up, and we're always interested for suggestions as to really how to leverage this. And we're very excited to see how people get creative with this idea. So very excited about that. Into the next module, please. I'll introduce myself. So Thomas Cull will be talking about the leadership and culture. Thank you, Thomas. So hello again. This is the culture and leadership module. This is a holdover from partially from GMRG 5. We saw recently quite a few articles being published in the use of the facility culture concepts. So we've been seeing people using those. So we felt this is useful and we would repeat it, but not just for that reason, for the reason I give right there. Peter Drucker long ago, culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, dinner, maybe even midnight snack. Really, the culture of a plant, this is near and dear to my heart. I've been working a lot in this area. It is highly impactful and influential and difficult to change. And so capturing or trying to explain variance in performance without culture is really a problem. So we wanted to keep that in the GMRG 6, but also include leadership. Hayes and Wheelwright, their book on manufacturing success and practices, they did a lot on trying to understand manufacturing, but they said in there, all this, I don't know if it matters a lot, because in the end, it's really leadership in the plant that derives success. But surprisingly, we hardly use a lot of leadership concepts in operations. More and more lately, but less than before. So we wanted to drive down that and really try to wade into those waters of understanding leadership styles and what that means. In particular, very interested in how leadership styles and culture norms interact to influence organizational outcomes. I'm kind of walking through the framework down below in the blue there. Facility characteristics and environmental pressures also, we deem these to be important areas that will influence these relationships. We have in the background, you'll see when you read the purpose and design document for this module, we focus a lot on the idea that when you look at more automation, and you'll hear a little bit EK and Luis will maybe talk about the digitalization. When we're seeing more of these Industry 4.0 characteristics of plants, what does the leadership look like? What does leadership look like in those new areas and those new types of manufacturing plants that we're seeing? In a lights out factory, what are the leaders doing? You know, so what leadership looks like, we think is going to be important going forward. So next slide, please. What are the main questions? So culture, what are the cultural bases for leadership, cultural bases for facility decisions? You know, what drives, so the culture question you can tie as the GMRG using this data, you can tie cultural frameworks to many of the decisions that are made. I mean, if you look at maybe the human resource side, or you look at some of the investments that are made, you can use the cultural concepts there. And very similarly, leadership styles, leadership practices, behaviors, how do those influence or moderate performances? So we also see a lot of fruitful work that can be done looking at interactions between different concepts and different investments. You know, conceptually, culture and leadership will drive the way practices are implemented. So not all lean manufacturing is done the same. Not all agile is done the same. Not all Six Sigma is done the same. So culture and leadership is very much likely to influence those. And so we see a lot of neat and useful research that can come out of that. The basis for these, again, as you'll see in the purpose and design documents, we leveraged the work of Detert, who 2000, that did kind of did a somewhat of a conceptual conglomeration of multiple organizational cultural frameworks. And there's 8 dimensions of kind of combined them, a lot of them together, and found 8 dimensions and related it to quality management in the Detert 2000 paper. We've used those multiple times, and that's what the basis for the culture framework. Inside of that, there's a Chen and Miller paper, 2010. You may not be. We found that this is it's something that has really been recognized as much as this notion of ambicultural realities inside of that. So we acknowledge that there's dichotomies within these various dimensions, and the dichotomies are not orthogonal, or the dichotomies can coexist. And this is the ambicultural reality that Chen and Miller first proposed, and we find evidence for it. And we have working papers. People have utilized this in the field, and you'll see this in the journals. So with the leadership practices, Yuko summarized these as you'll see these in a moment. And we utilized this. It's been around for quite some time, noting that it's particularly around behaviors, leadership styles and behaviors. And you'll see that there are echoes of the transformational, transactional, and laissez-faire type dimensions of leadership. So last important note, you know, flashing light, these are polycratic constructs. Definitely, if you ask any one person, you're going to get different responses as what is culture, and it really takes multiple respondents to truly capture it. And in fact, you can use the multiple respondents in various ways. So polycratic constructs here in these modules, so definitely multiple respondents are needed in these. So next slide, please. Just so if you're not familiar with these deterrents, and Yuko here is on the left, the facility culture, we essentially took those 8 dimensions and itemized them into these 8 different areas of rationality, long-term horizon, intrinsic motivation, stability, norms, production-centric, collaboration, centralized, and internal resource norms. So all of these are being captured, but we capture both ends of each of these dimensions. We in the culture module, and then in the practice of facility leadership, on the you'll see it's kind of hard to read the boxes that go down on the left-hand side of that white larger box. You'll see clarifying, monitoring, short-term planning, developing, supporting, consulting, recognizing, empowering, and visioning. All these have been measured before. This is nothing new. We just use what others have done. But we note that you can see how they have been shown to have second order constructs of task, relation, and change. And this is what I mentioned about echoes of the, if you're into the Bass and Ovioli, I'm saying that wrong, Oviolio work of transformational leadership or transactional leadership, you'll see that echoed there as a task and change also as well. So if you're interested in at least capturing the overall concepts, I know those are different measures that they use, but same underlying ideas. So anyways, this is what is underlying the facility culture and leadership. Next slide, please. If you have questions about this, once again, I want to emphasize we have that purpose and design document that describes why we justifying why we use these, where the measures came from, and how we develop these measures. They've been Q sorted and validated in that way, and so they should, we hope, work well for us in this round of GMRG 6.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. The next presentation is on supply chain digitalization by Ike and Louise.
All right, thank you, Goke, and greetings to everyone. I'm going to be presenting the supply chain module. If I could, Tom, if I could paraphrase your statement there, I mean, one could say that digitalization eats supply chain strategy for lunch. How is that? So now before I continue, I'd like to recognize a few folks that have really contributed to this model. Obviously myself, Louis, and Evelyn Van Poki from Brussels has three of us met on numerous Zoom sessions looking at this this particular module. And also I'd like to thank most of you for your input in the various meetings that we've had looking at these this module. So credits go to all of you. Now, I'm not going to go over all the slides since you already have the slide deck with you. So I'm just going to hit on some of the key points. Obviously, like I said, digitalization has really come to the fore given the recent environment that we face. So this could not be any more appropriate this time to look at the role or the effect of digitalization on supply chain strategy. So in terms of motivation, the advent of the fourth industrial revolution, as was alluded by Tom earlier, that is built on digital technology is rapidly transforming the supply chain, distribution, and network as we know it today. We've seen a number of recent call for papers by top journals asking, research in the area of digital supply chain. So those all really motivated the interest to look at digitalization and the role it plays in terms of designing a supply chain. Next slide, please. So again, in terms of supply chain digitalization, it helps to improve the capabilities by allowing companies to trim operating costs, improve product quality while increasing sales revenue through expanding market share, developing new products, and meeting customer needs. So obviously, these are all points that kind of support the fact that digitalization has actually transformed some of these companies that have embarked on it. And consequently, that's why we wanted to take a look at how the role that it plays and how that can help to develop even much better capabilities of supply chain. So next slide. So now in terms of the digital technology themselves, in the core module, we have questions that really ask them the investment they've made in these technologies in the last 2 years and the current level of engagement. And this is how we've been able to gauge the extent to which these companies have invested and engaged in digital technology. And we've listed a whole list of digital technologies, as you can see from these slides. And these are all embedded in the core module. That's where we pick up these digital or digitalization. Okay, so next slide. So again, we're looking at how this digitalization has been able to build supply chain capabilities. And we're looking at it from the lenses of the SCORE module, which looks at the plan, source, make, deliver, and return, asking to what extent are these processes developed and enhanced using digitalization, and what will be their role in building capabilities that will allow supply chains to perform at a much higher level. So next slide, please. So here we have two basic research questions that we've posed. Like I mentioned earlier, we draw on the basic building block of the SCORE framework, which is the plan, source, make, deliver, and return, to investigate the impact of supply chain digitalization on supply chain capabilities through supply chain complexity as a moderating factor in this case. Therefore, we propose the following research questions to guide the development of the module. First question, does the use of digital technologies in the core supply chain processes of SCORE model enables companies to effectively develop capabilities to manage supply chain complexity? So that's the first research question. And then the second question, research question, is to what extent is operational performance improved by the development of supply chain capabilities that are enabled by digital technologies in the core supply chain processes? So those are the two research questions that, again, the first was looking at the effect of digital technology as they develop some of those capabilities. And then the other question is to look at the role of supply chain complexity, both complexity in terms of downstream, internal processes, as well as upstream. So I'm going to explain a little bit more on that later, but let's look at the objective of the module. So the objective of the supply chain module, therefore, is to assess the extent to which supply chain digitalization enable companies to manage more complex supply chains, which will positively influence operational performance. Okay. So with this objective, let's go right into the framework that guided this module. Next slide, please. Robert? Okay, there we go. So here is the research framework. Again, on the left, the box on the left talks about supply chain digitalization. That is measured by those 10 digital technologies, asking the question, what is the level of investment in the last 2 years? And to what extent are you engaged in this supply chain digital technologies? And then we look at how that has really built supply chain capabilities, looking at internal integration or collaboration, supply chain planning, supply chain involvement, customer involvement, robustness, and resilience. Okay, so these are the capabilities that we're trying to assess within the supply chain. Now, while we are doing that, we realize that some of these could, have the supply chain complexity, both the downstream, internal manufacturing, as well as upstream, might have a role in explaining some of those capabilities. And those come in as moderating factors to really moderate the effect between the digitalization itself and the investment and building up those capabilities. And ultimately, we look at the effect of operational performance as an outcome from this investment and development of the capabilities. So this is the overall framework that guided the supply chain module. And then the next set of slides will go into the questionnaire that asked this question. So the first page, if you notice, the first 5 questions talk about the role of digitalization on planning, on sourcing, on making, on delivering, and then on return, asking them to what extent does digitalization actually influence or impact those processes in the supply chain. And the next slide. So the next slide, the last two slides, on your left-hand side, you have the capabilities. So now we're asking them the capabilities that have been developed at the company level or at the facility level, asking the questions on internal coordination or internal integration, supply chain planning, supply chain involvement, customer involvement, supply chain robustness, and then supply chain resilience. So these are the capabilities that we're going to assess looking at the role of digitalization in supply chain. And I think that's, and then the last two questions were, the common questions that were common to all the modules that have been presented. So next. And I think that's it. This is a kind of quick overview of the supply chain module. And then if anyone has a question, I'll be more than happy to take those. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ike. So again, if anyone has any questions, please use the Q&A function. So we'll move on to the last presentation of the day. I move back to the man of the hour. Tom is now going to talk about how this is going to be done, the methodology.
Okay. It's nice to be last, and it's nice to be on time. In fact, you'll notice, Professor Oki, I have given myself 14 minutes now on this. I'm going to bore you for fun. I have some math to go through for everyone. No, so essentially this is a part again of what GMRG. If you're new to GMRG, or if you're just starting getting more involved with GMRG, I mean, this is our value proposition to you. We provide knowledge and education as well as a lot of extra work for you. What we have here is a brief little description of maybe what to do now. I mean, we collect all this multiple respondent data. We recognize that we have a nested structure of our data set, nested within country, nested within industry, and other nesting that has yet to be discovered. So what to do with that information and how to wield this rich data set that we hope to generate. Well, part of this is the analysis methodologies. With a lot of sophisticated stuff that's been developed over the years that we have at our disposal. And I want to talk a little bit about that here. But the group is here for you to help you with any analysis issues that you have. We want to help you be successful in the review process. So in making our measures more reliable, more accurate, and getting multiple respondents, how do you use that? How do you utilize that? And I want to talk about some on the collection side and on the analysis side, things to keep in mind. Also, we've alluded to multiple times. Marshall did better than I did. What we've embedded in this survey are qualitative responses. This is we're wading into troubled waters here with qualitative open-ended responses. But we're quite excited to give it a shot, because we think, and I found in my own research, a lot of use in getting that richness, getting that complementary information. It can be very useful, we think, in truly understanding what's going on. And we provided, each module has some qualitative responses that we want to talk a little bit here about the collection issues with that and analysis. So next slide, please. All right, so handling multiple respondents. So I've used this term polyadic. If I've kind of used this incorrectly or used this in a confusing way, please refer to the Flynn et al. Paper 2018 in JSCM. Talks extensively about the need for dealing with polyadic or multidimensional or constructs that require multiple respondents. And in that guise, or if we know that we have that need to, what we need is more and more respondents. But so 2 is better than 1, 3 is better than 2, and that's nice. But there's kind of a happy medium in the sense that it gets to be there's a diminishing return, so to speak, as you collect more and more respondents. And so understanding that there's going to still be some discussion as to how many respondents are you going to be able to collect for, let's say, the culture module, and what's the minimum that you need. I mean, we've thrown around a few. We need to further discuss that, and we're working with George and Teresa on this issue. But we know we need more than one, probably up to maybe even 3 to 5 or more. So we recognize that that's a challenge. It's not necessarily easy to get everyone to respond. Now these at least in the culture and leadership area, it's not onerous, but it does take some time. We say roughly about 10 minutes or so to complete that section. And so how do you emphasize that? How do you incentivize that? You got to work with, as a data collector, we know you're going to have to work with your key contact in strategizing how to help their people respond. I mean, we're working through the pilot study now, and I'm working with a company, and they got plenty of other things to be doing right now, and so how to help them, incentivize them, and that's part of that. When we talk about that benchmarking study, we talk about that Frank is working on, and we're going to be helping you to promise to them that there's going to be this tool for them at the end that they can then use to learn about their own facility. Maybe they've never measured culture before. This would be very useful for them. So getting buy-in from them as much as possible to incentivize that. So we recognize that getting multiple respondents is not going to be easy all the time. So let's be part of a collective here and come up and sharing the best practices, again, back in the FAQ that we want to be building, helping you do that. So analysis. What do you do when what do you do with all, if you have 10, let's say you have 10 respondents on culture, you have 10 different viewpoints, what do you do with that? Well, first thing you do is you're going to probably want to aggregate that. You're going to want to maybe take the average of that, or some type of centering or some type of common response of some type amongst those respondents. One of the first things that's done, and LeBreton and Blease and others have emphasized shown how to do this, is you want to do a within group agreement score. You want to get that an interclass correlation ICC scores. And there's a ICC1 and ICC2. Read those. I put those references at the bottom, and I include this in the appendices for this presentation, what those measures are. You want to hit a certain threshold of within group agreement. I believe we're at a 0.7 or above. It ranges from 0 to 1. And you want to get a 0.7. Essentially, it says what level of agreement exists within the responses. With a certain, once you achieve a certain threshold, you can legitimately aggregate the responses. It means we're getting agreement. And so, that's just something to look out for. However, I think it's very interesting that the variance itself in the response is information. It's somewhat akin to what's been termed cultural strength, if you're looking at culture specifically. a large degree of variance means a fairly weak culture. It's not obvious what's in the culture, but if it's you're getting a high level of agreement, you have a cultural strength, and that could be a useful factor in influencing things. So I think just looking at not only some central tendency or average, but also looking at the variance can be useful information. So and again, checking that within group agreement and ICC 1 and 2 is standard practice, and you're going to be wanting to do that when using any of the multiple respondent measures. Okay, next, please. There's also this issue of qualitative data, so we're going to be collecting all these interesting comments and anecdotes, and people are going to be saying their all kinds of things. So, this is a very open-ended element of the survey. So what do you do? Well, first, let's talk about data collection problems. You're going to probably get a range of responses. It's going to be either, something akin to, you may even get just a little emoji on the, who knows what you're going to get. So I think when you're dealing with your key contact, you want to emphasize that we've provided an ample space for people to put their information. So we want rich data. We want them to comment. So please take the time to put your thoughts as to the reasoning behind some of the answers that you're giving. We know that people may be responding in their native language, and so we got to be able to deal with the translation process, and being careful with that is also important. So being mindful of the way in which people respond and being prepared to handle that is part of our job on our end, and we want to work with you as a data collector on making sure that you feel comfortable with this and you're getting the quality of information that we want. So once again, incentivizing the people to respond in a certain way. But then, okay, so what do you do with all this once you get it? So it's generally assumed that if you're not going to be there, if you're not trained in open-ended, handling open-ended questions, if you're not doing this in a what would be considered almost a case-based type approach, we don't think that the qualitative data can stand on its own. Essentially, it's there to complement the quantitative data. It's there as a complementary element. So we think that it could enrich the quantitative information that you're observing, and it could help you be a little bit exploratory and inductive in reasoning why you're seeing the variances that you were seeing quantitatively. It doesn't mean that you can't do qualitative coding. You can. I mean, that's essentially ways in which you can abstract messy information, very qualitative. You can abstract it through some either qualitative coding of some type, and we can help you with the tools that are out there. And there's even automated coding that may be interesting. It's still in development, emerging field, but there are some you can abstract that qualitative information and then compile it. And then we have there are text mining tools out there that use natural language processing, just as simple as word clouds, or doing such a thing as sentiment analysis, just essentially trying to understand basics about how people are responding to maybe issues of digitalization or issues of innovation. You can use these text mining tools, and again, they are meant to be complementary to the other data that's being collected that's more quantitative. And I can give you an example. I think my next slide, I have an example of, go ahead and you can advance it, Robert. Oh, I don't. Is it past the questions? Go one more. Oh, go past the math. We don't want to look at that. One more. Okay. Here's an example. We're working on this is where we did a behavioral experiment where we had people answering on the y-axis is the, well, on the x-axis is the ambiguity that we gave them, and they had to they do a selection of a behavioral selection of product design. And we essentially asked for the rationale for why they did a certain product design. And here we use the sentiment analysis, and I note at the top it's rapid minor with an alien add-on. This is essentially an automated tool that, and sentiment analysis is really emerging a lot. We're seeing a lot of that in the journals to gauge, try to understand just the orientation towards a certain construct or concept. And we did across the US, China, India, and Germany. I believe Christian is on the line here. He was integral to this work as well. And we used this sentiment analysis, which was basically text mining from qualitative open-ended question inside a behavioral experiment that was highly quantitative. And we used this to help explain some of the variances that we saw, the unexpectedness in our results. So it was very complementary. It was an augmenting or helping on top of the quantitative assessments that we were doing. Well, that's just an example, and we have more. So what I want you to emphasize is that we don't look at that qualitative information as useless. It is useful, and we can help you and make it more useful. Okay, is there anything else I have in here, Robert? No. All right.
Okay, thanks, Tom. That was great. You had some minutes in the bank, but you used it and even went into overdraft. But but it's okay. Seriously, I'd like to thank all the presenters for being time conscious. You guys made my job very, very easy. I would like to hand over to Marcio now, the president-elect, to close the conference.
All right, I'm unmuted now. So thank you, Adego, again, for this terrific organization of the conference with Robert, Swati, all this great support we're having around with Professor Widmere, very actively participating in organizing the conference as well. And I really very, very, very pleased to see that you see we run this poll during the conference, and about 70% of attendees that answered the poll are data collectors. So I think that is really what was intended as audience for this meeting. And let's just, before closing, just get a fast spoil on the September 18th and looking forward to meet you all there, where we'll be talking more about region and country specific issues, different media for data collection, and getting a clear focus on September 18th on post feedback and outreach activities for GMRG 6, and with a very interesting discussion that will be set as well about publications and how to publish in first-tier journals. This is a talk that's expected by Tyson Brownie and Michael Runco from JOM on publications using empirical research, which is pretty much of what we are looking forward to have. So thank you all for attending, and thank you, Robert, to getting this spoiled up to the next presentations and topics for September 18th. And I thank you all for attending, and I'm looking forward to meet you all in 15 days to resume Q&As and debating a little bit more about the GMRG research and outreach activities. Thank you all. We are now closing our first half of the annual meeting. Thank you.